Imagine building a life together, only to discover it was all a lie. A loving father, a beautiful family, and a wife whose betrayal shattered it all. This is the chilling story of how I uncovered the darkest secrets on Christmas night, a night meant for miracles, and made the hardest decision of my life. Watch until the end to see how it all unfolded and how I reclaimed my life from the ashes. When I first met Amanda, she felt like the missing piece in my life. I was 26, working as a technician in Boston, and she was the kind of woman who lit up any room she walked into. She had this effortless charm, a magnetic smile that made you believe the world was a better place when she was in it. We dated for a year before I proposed during a surprise weekend trip to Cape Cod. She cried, said yes, and in that moment, I felt like the luckiest man alive. Our wedding was modest but beautiful. We bought a small house in the suburbs, painted it together, and turned it into a home. 2 kids followed, Liam, with his inquisitive nature, and Emily, whose laughter could warm the coldest winter day. Life wasn't perfect, but it was ours. I worked long hours to provide, and Amanda stayed home with the kids. She always dreamed of a life of luxury, but I thought we were happy building our little piece of the American dream. It's funny how illusions work. They're perfect until you see the cracks. And I had no idea that beneath Amanda's bright exterior lurked a darkness I wasn't prepared for. The first time Amanda criticized me, it caught me off guard. It was a Sunday morning, and I'd just finished making pancakes for the kids. Emily had syrup smeared across her cheeks, and Liam was laughing so hard he nearly fell off his chair. It was one of those moments you wish you could freeze in time. But Amanda's words shattered the peace. Jack, why can't you be more ambitious? We're barely getting by, and I'm tired of struggling. Her tone wasn't loud or angry. It was cold. I tried to laugh it off, but the comment lingered. Over time, her remarks became sharper. She'd compare me to the neighbors, to her friends' husbands, to anyone who earned more money or had a flashier car. I worked harder, picked up extra shifts, but it was never enough. Amanda's words echoed in my mind. You're not a real man if you can't provide. I didn't realize it at the time, but those words planted seeds of doubt that would grow into a forest of insecurity. As the years passed, Amanda's criticism transformed into something far more insidious. It wasn't just the occasional comment anymore. It was a constant undercurrent in our home. The worst part was how casually she did it. She'd throw out little barbs at the dinner table or while we were folding laundry, as though they were nothing. You're just not cut out for success, Jack, she'd say, her eyes never leaving her phone. Or, if only I'd married someone with real ambition, my life wouldn't feel so small. The first time she said that in front of Liam and Emily, I froze. Liam looked up from his homework, confused, while Emily stared at her plate, her little hands gripping her fork. My stomach churned, but I didn't confront her. I told myself it wasn't worth the fight. But it wasn't just words. Amanda had a way of making me feel invisible. She'd dismiss my ideas, roll her eyes when I spoke, and find ways to belittle me in front of her friends. Once, during a barbecue with neighbors, she joked about my dead-end job, while everyone laughed awkwardly. I smiled along, pretending it didn't sting. Behind closed doors, it was worse. She'd accuse me of not trying hard enough, of being the reason she couldn't have the life she wanted. And when I tried to defend myself, she'd twist my words until I started to doubt my own perspective. You're overreacting, she'd say with a smirk. Stop being so sensitive. I began to question everything about myself. Was I really failing her? Was I failing my family? Amanda made me feel like I wasn't just a bad husband, I was a bad father, too. And the more she said it, the more I started to believe it. By the time Liam was 9 and Emily was 6, Amanda had become a stranger to me. There were days when we barely spoke, nights when she'd retreat to the guest room under the pretense of needing space. I'd lie awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering when everything had gone so wrong. Her affection, once so warm and genuine, had turned ice cold. Hugs became rare, kisses mechanical, and she flinched at my touch. I tried to talk to her, to understand what was happening, but every attempt ended in frustration. "Not everything is about you, Jack," she snapped one evening. "I'm tired, okay? Just leave me alone." Imagine this. You've spent years building what you thought was the perfect life. Family dinners, a home full of laughter, dreams for the future. You work hard every day to provide for your wife and kids, thinking that everything is exactly as it should be. But what if I told you that behind the smiles, behind the doors of your own home, the person you trusted the most was hiding the darkest of secrets? This is the shocking story of how I, a devoted father, was blindsided by betrayal in the most unimaginable way. A betrayal that unfolded on Christmas night, a night meant for love, joy, and miracles, only to reveal the cold truth of lies, deceit, and heartbreak. Imagine the shock of discovering that your entire reality had been a carefully constructed illusion, and the person who was supposed to be your partner was plotting something far darker. I thought I knew everything about my wife, about our life together, but what I uncovered left me speechless and shattered. It wasn't just an affair. It was the unraveling of everything I believed in. The sting of her betrayal cut deeper than I could have ever imagined. And when I found out the truth, I was faced with the hardest decision of my life. Whether to stay in a relationship built on lies or to walk away and fight for a future I never thought I'd have to choose for myself. This isn't just a story of betrayal. It's the story of reclaiming my life, my dignity, and my future from the ashes of the life I thought I knew. In this video, I'll walk you through how everything came crashing down, piece by piece, and how I found the courage to stand up for myself and my children. You won't believe the twists and turns this story takes, so make sure you watch until the end to see how everything unfolded and how I took back control of my life. Trust me, you won't want to miss what happened next. When I first met Amanda, she felt like the missing piece in my life. I was 26, working as a technician in Boston, and she was the kind of woman who lit up any room she walked into. She had this effortless charm, a magnetic smile that made you believe the world was a better place when she was in it. We dated for a year before I proposed during a surprise weekend trip to Cape Cod. She cried, said yes, and in that moment, I felt like the luckiest man alive. Our wedding was modest but beautiful. We bought a small house in the suburbs, painted it together, and turned it into a home. 2 kids followed, Liam, with his inquisitive nature, and Emily, whose laughter could warm the coldest winter day. Life wasn't perfect, but it was ours. I worked long hours to provide, and Amanda stayed home with the kids. She always dreamed of a life of luxury, but I thought we were happy building our little piece of the American dream. It's funny how illusions work. They're perfect until you see the cracks. And I had no idea that beneath Amanda's bright exterior lurked a darkness I wasn't prepared for. The first time Amanda criticized me, it caught me off guard. It was a Sunday morning, and I'd just finished making pancakes for the kids. Emily had syrup smeared across her cheeks, and Liam was laughing so hard he nearly fell off his chair. It was one of those moments you wish you could freeze in time. But Amanda's words shattered the peace. "Jack, why can't you be more ambitious? We're barely getting by, and I'm tired of struggling." Her tone wasn't loud or angry. It was cold. I tried to laugh it off, but the comment lingered. Over time, her remarks became sharper. She'd compare me to the neighbors, to her friends' husbands, to anyone who earned more money or had a flashier car. I worked harder, picked up extra shifts, but it was never enough. Amanda's words echoed in my mind. "You're not a real man if you can't provide." I didn't realize it at the time, but those words planted seeds of doubt that would grow into a forest of insecurity. As the years passed, Amanda's criticism transformed into something far more insidious. It wasn't just the occasional comment anymore. It was a constant undercurrent in our home. The worst part was how casually she did it. She'd throw out little barbs at the dinner table or while we were folding laundry, as though they were nothing. "You're just not cut out for success, Jack," she'd say, her eyes never leaving her phone. Or, "If only I'd married someone with real ambition, my life wouldn't feel so small." The first time she said that in front of Liam and Emily, I froze. Liam looked up from his homework, confused, while Emily stared at her plate, her little hands gripping her fork. My stomach churned, But I didn't confront her. I told myself it wasn't worth the fight. But it wasn't just words. Amanda had a way of making me feel invisible. She'd dismiss my ideas, roll her eyes when I spoke, and find ways to belittle me in front of her friends. Once, during a barbecue with neighbors, she joked about my dead-end job, while everyone laughed awkwardly. I smiled along, pretending it didn't sting. Behind closed doors, it was worse. She'd accuse me of not trying hard enough, of being the reason she couldn't have the life she wanted. And when I tried to defend myself, she'd twist my words until I started to doubt my own perspective. "You're overreacting," she'd say with a smirk. "Stop being so sensitive." I began to question everything about myself. Was I really failing her? Was I failing my family? Amanda made me feel like I wasn't just a bad husband, I was a bad father, too. And the more she said it, the more I started to believe it. By the time Liam was 9 and Emily was 6, Amanda had become a stranger to me. There were days when we barely spoke, nights when she'd retreat to the guest room under the pretense of needing space. I'd lie awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering when everything had gone so wrong. Her affection, once so warm and genuine, had turned ice-cold. Hugs became rare, kisses mechanical, and she flinched at my touch. I tried to talk to her, to understand what was happening, but every attempt ended in frustration. "Not everything is about you, Jack," she snapped one evening. "I'm tired, okay? Just leave me alone." The distance between us wasn't just emotional, it was physical. Amanda began spending more time out of the house. She'd claim she was meeting friends or running errands, but her absences grew longer and more frequent. One night, I caught her smiling at a text on her phone, her face illuminated by the glow of the screen. When I asked who it was, she quickly locked the phone and brushed me off. "Just a friend from work," she said, too casually. I wanted to believe her, but something felt off. The laughter that once filled our home had been replaced by silence. I'd sit in the living room after putting the kids to bed, staring at the empty space where she used to be, wondering if she was ever coming back. The first time I truly suspected something was wrong, it was because of the phone calls. Amanda had always been private, but now she guarded her phone like it was a state secret. She'd leave the room to answer calls, her voice dropping to a whisper. If I happened to walk in, she'd end the call abruptly. One evening, as I was helping Emily with her reading homework, I noticed Amanda sitting at the kitchen table, laughing softly into her phone. Her back was to me, but the tone in her voice was unmistakable, playful, almost flirtatious. "Who's that?" I asked casually, leaning against the doorway. She jumped slightly, quickly ending the call. "Just Sarah," she said, referring to one of her friends. Her smile was too tight, her movements too quick as she slipped the phone into her pocket. I wanted to believe her, but doubt crept in. Over the next few weeks, the calls became more frequent, the secrecy more blatant. One night, as she stepped out onto the porch to take a call, I couldn't hold back anymore. "Why do you always have to leave the room to talk?" I asked when she came back inside. Her eyes narrowed. "Because I can't even have a private conversation without you breathing down my neck," she snapped. "God, Jack, do you have to be so insecure?" Her words stung, but her reaction only deepened my suspicions. I started noticing other things. How she'd dress up more when she went out with friends. How she'd come home later and later. When I asked her about it, she'd roll her eyes and accuse me of being controlling. "You're imagining things," she'd say, brushing me off. But I wasn't imagining the growing chasm between us. It wasn't long before a name started to surface in her conversations. Ben. She mentioned him casually at first, slipping his name into stories about work or social events. "Ben said the funniest thing today," she'd say, or, "I ran into Ben at the coffee shop." I didn't think much of it at first. Ben was just a name, just a coworker, or so I thought. But then I started noticing how her face would light up when she talked about him. There was a softness in her tone, a warmth that I hadn't heard in years. One night, while Amanda was in the shower, her phone buzzed on the counter. A message preview popped up on the screen. "Can't stop thinking about tonight. Can't wait to see you again." My chest tightened. I picked up the phone, my hands trembling, and unlocked it. There it was, a thread of messages between Amanda and Ben, messages that left no room for doubt. The words on the screen blurred as my heart pounded in my chest. When Amanda came out of the shower, I confronted her. "Who is Ben, really?" Her eyes widened for a split second before narrowing. "Don't you dare go through my phone," she hissed, snatching it from my hands. "You're invading my privacy." "Privacy?" I shouted, my voice breaking. "You're having an affair." But she didn't deny it. Instead, she stormed out of the house, leaving me alone with the cold realization of what my life had become. The air was heavy with the scent of pine needles and cinnamon that Christmas Eve. The kids and I had spent the entire day decorating the house, stringing lights on the porch, and baking cookies in the kitchen. Liam carefully arranged the ornaments on the tree while Emily sang Christmas carols off-key. Their joy was infectious, even for me, despite the weight I'd been carrying in my chest for weeks. Amanda had left earlier that afternoon, saying she needed to grab a few last-minute gifts. I didn't argue. Part of me was relieved to have a few hours of peace without her sharp words or cold silences. I convinced myself that tonight would be different, that the magic of Christmas would bring a fleeting sense of normalcy back to our fractured family. But as the hours ticked by and the kids grew tired, Amanda still hadn't come home. I tucked Liam and Emily into bed, kissing their foreheads as they drifted off to sleep. Sitting alone in the dim light of the Christmas tree, I tried calling her, but it went straight to voicemail. Midnight came and went. I sat there, staring at the untouched plate of cookies Liam had left for Santa, my mind racing with dark thoughts. Where was she? What excuse would she give this time? My phone buzzed on the coffee table, pulling me out of my spiral. It wasn't Amanda. It was a text from an unknown number. "Thought you should know where your wife is tonight." Attached was a photo. My stomach dropped as I opened it. There she was, sitting in a dimly lit restaurant, leaning across the table toward Ben. The way she smiled at him, the way his hand rested on hers. It was a look I hadn't seen from her in years. The rage that boiled up inside me was unlike anything I'd ever felt. My hands shook as I stared at the screen, my breath coming in shallow gasps. This wasn't just betrayal. It was a slap in the face on the one night that was supposed to be about family and love. When Amanda finally walked through the door, it was nearly 2 a.m. She smelled faintly of wine and perfume that wasn't hers. She barely glanced at me before heading toward the bedroom, but I stood up, blocking her path. "Where were you?" My voice was low but trembling with anger. "Don't start, Jack. I'm too tired for this," she said, brushing past me. I grabbed her arm, not hard, but enough to stop her. "Where were you?" She turned to me with a look of contempt. "Out," she said flatly. "What difference does it make?" My grip loosened, and I stepped back, my voice cracking. "It makes a difference because I know about Ben. I know where you've been, Amanda. I know everything." For a moment, I saw something flicker in her eyes. Fear, maybe, but it was quickly replaced by cold defiance. "So what if you do?" she spat. "What are you going to do about it, Jack? You're nothing without me." Her words hit like a sledgehammer, but they also gave me clarity. She didn't care. She didn't care about me, about the kids, about the life we had built together. And in that moment, I knew I couldn't let her continue to destroy what little was left. The house was silent as Amanda locked herself in the bedroom, but my mind was anything but. I sat on the edge of the couch, staring at the Christmas tree lights as they blinked on and off, each flash illuminating the fragments of my shattered life. I made my decision quickly. There was no time to dwell on the pain or the betrayal. I couldn't let my children wake up to this broken home, not on Christmas morning. Quietly, I packed a bag with essentials for Liam and Emily. I grabbed their favorite toys, a change of clothes, and the stuffed animals they couldn't sleep without. By the time I crept into their rooms to wake them, my hands were trembling. "Come on, buddy," I whispered to Liam, gently shaking his shoulder. "We're going on a little trip." His sleepy eyes blinked open. "Where's Mom?" "She's resting," I said, forcing a calmness into my voice that I didn't feel. But we need to go. It'll be an adventure, okay? Emily stirred as I lifted her into my arms, her tiny hand clutching her blanket. Are we going to see Santa? She mumbled, half asleep. Something like that, I said, my throat tightening. I loaded them into the car as quickly and quietly as I could, the freezing night air biting at my skin. My heart pounded as I backed out of the driveway, terrified that Amanda would hear us and come storming out. But the house remained dark and silent as we drove away, the only sound the hum of the engine and the soft snoring of my children in the back seat. We drove for hours, heading north toward my brother's cabin in New Hampshire. The roads were empty, and the snow-covered trees blurred into streaks of white as I tried to keep my focus. I didn't let myself think too far ahead. For now, it was enough to know that we were leaving, that I was finally taking control. By the time we reached the cabin, the sun was beginning to rise. Liam and Emily were still asleep as I carried them inside, tucking them into the spare beds. I sat down at the kitchen table, staring out at the snow-covered woods, and let the first tears fall. For the first time in years, I felt something I hadn't dared to hope for: freedom. The morning light streamed through the cabin's frosted windows, casting a soft glow over the room. The kids were still sleeping, their breaths steady and peaceful, oblivious to the storm that had ripped through our lives. I envied their innocence. For a moment, I just stood there, watching them, my heart aching with the knowledge that I couldn't protect them from everything. I checked my phone for the first time since we'd left. Unsurprisingly, there were dozens of missed calls and texts from Amanda. The first few messages were terse. "Where are you? This isn't funny, Jack." Then they turned angrier. "If you don't come back right now, you'll regret it. You're a coward. Taking the kids? Really? Grow up." Finally, the tone shifted to desperation. "Please, Jack, come home. Let's talk about this." I didn't mean what I said. Don't ruin Christmas for the kids. Her manipulation was almost laughable. She hadn't cared about Christmas when she was out with Ben. But now, when it served her purpose, she wanted to play the devoted mother. I tossed the phone onto the table, disgusted. My brother, Mike, arrived a few hours later. His cabin had been our family's retreat for years, a safe haven far removed from the chaos of everyday life. When I'd called him in the middle of the night, he hadn't asked questions, just told me to come. "Jack," he said, pulling me into a bear hug the moment he walked through the door. "You okay?" I shook my head. "Not even close." He nodded, his expression grim. "Well, you're safe here. That's all that matters right now." As we sat in the kitchen, I told him everything: the affair, the years of emotional abuse, the moment I decided I couldn't stay any longer. Mike listened quietly, his jaw tightening as I spoke. "You did the right thing," he said when I finished. "She doesn't deserve you, and the kids deserve better." His words were a balm to my battered spirit, but they didn't erase the fear gnawing at me. What would happen next? Would Amanda try to fight for custody? Would she twist the story to make me the villain? By the second day at the cabin, Amanda's messages took a darker turn. She accused me of kidnapping, threatened to call the police, and demanded to know our location. "You can't just take the kids and disappear," one text read. "This is illegal, Jack. You're going to regret this." I felt the panic rising again, but Mike was calm. "She's bluffing," he said. "You didn't kidnap them, you're their father. As long as you're not hiding from the law, she doesn't have a case." Still, I couldn't shake the dread. Amanda had always been skilled at twisting the truth to her advantage. I could already imagine her spinning a story about how I was an unfit father, how I'd snapped and taken the kids without warning. The next day, she called. Against my better judgment, I picked up. "Jack," she said, her voice trembling. "We need to talk." I didn't say anything, waiting for her to continue. "I know I've made mistakes," she said, "but you can't just take my kids away from me. I'm their mother. Don't you think they'll hate you for this?" Her words were calculated, designed to pierce through my resolve. But I'd spent years being manipulated by her, and this time, I wouldn't let her win. "I took them because I won't let them grow up in a toxic home," I said, my voice steady. "I won't let them see you treat me like I'm worthless." They deserve better than that. There was silence on the other end of the line before she spoke again, her tone icy. You think you're the hero in this? You're not. You're just a bitter little man who can't handle the fact that he's not enough. I hung up, my hands shaking. For years, her words had held power over me. But this time, they didn't cut as deep. I knew the truth now, and no amount of manipulation could take that away. Over the next week, I began to rebuild. It wasn't easy. Every step felt like dragging a weight behind me. But I knew I couldn't let Amanda's betrayal define me. The kids adjusted surprisingly well to life at the cabin. Liam loved exploring the woods with Mike, and Emily spent hours drawing pictures of snowmen and Christmas trees. One night, as we sat around the fireplace, Liam looked up at me and asked, "Are we ever going home?" The question hit me like a punch to the gut. "This is home for now," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "But I promise, wherever we go, we'll be together. That's what matters." He seemed to accept that, nodding thoughtfully before going back to his book. But his question lingered in my mind. What would home look like for us now? How would I create a new life for my kids? One free from Amanda's toxicity. The answers didn't come overnight, but for the first time in years, I felt hope. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was fighting for something better. 2 weeks passed in the snowy solitude of the cabin. The kids had adjusted better than I expected. Their laughter began to fill the quiet spaces, and for the first time in years, I felt a sense of peace. But that peace was short-lived. One morning, as I was making breakfast, I heard a loud knock at the cabin door. My heart raced as I opened it to find a man in a suit holding a thick envelope. "Jack Mason?" he asked. "Yes," I replied cautiously. He handed me the envelope. "You've been served." The words hit like a thunderclap. I tore open the envelope and skimmed the papers inside. Amanda was filing for full custody of Liam and Emily. She was accusing me of being unstable, irresponsible, and unfit to care for them. My hands shook as I read through the accusations. Each word felt like a dagger aimed at my heart. Amanda's ability to twist the truth was on full display. She claimed I had kidnapped the children, that I had a history of anger issues, and even implied that the cabin was an unsafe environment for them. Mike walked into the kitchen and saw the look on my face. "What's going on?" I handed him the papers without a word. He read them, his expression darkening with every page. "This is bull asterisk 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 asterisk," he said, slamming the papers onto the counter. "She's trying to scare you. Don't let her." But the fear was already there. Amanda had money, connections, and a knack for manipulating people. I felt like David standing before Goliath, armed with nothing but a few stones and sheer determination. I spent the next few days making calls, trying to find a lawyer who would take my case. Most of them were hesitant. "Custody battles can get ugly," one of them said, "especially when the mother is making accusations like this." Finally, I found someone willing to fight for me. Her name was Grace Porter, a no-nonsense attorney with a reputation for taking on tough cases. "If what you're telling me is true," she said during our first meeting, "we have a chance, but you need to be prepared for a battle. Amanda won't play fair." I nodded, my jaw set. "I'll do whatever it takes. I just want to protect my kids." The first court hearing was a nightmare. Amanda sat across from me, dressed impeccably in a tailored suit, her expression calm and composed. She looked every bit the doting mother, the picture of stability. I, on the other hand, felt like a wreck. My palms were sweaty, my heart pounding as the judge began to speak. Amanda's lawyer wasted no time painting me as the villain. He brought up every mistake I'd ever made, twisting them into something far worse. "Mr. Mason has demonstrated a pattern of instability," he said, his voice smooth and confident. "Taking the children without their mother's knowledge or consent shows a blatant disregard for their well-being." Amanda's eyes glistened with fake tears as she described how devastated she was when she woke up on Christmas morning to find her children gone. She played the victim perfectly, her voice trembling as she spoke about her deep concern for their safety. But Grace wasn't intimidated. When it was her turn to speak, she stood up and delivered a scathing rebuttal. "Your Honor, My client acted out of a desire to protect his children from an emotionally abusive environment. We have evidence that Mrs. Mason has been engaging in an extramarital affair, neglecting her responsibilities as a mother, and creating a toxic home environment. She presented text messages, photos, and even a statement from one of Amanda's co-workers who had witnessed her behavior firsthand. Each piece of evidence felt like a small victory, a crack in Amanda's carefully constructed facade. For the first time, I saw a flicker of uncertainty in Amanda's eyes. The custody battle dragged on for months. Every day was a new fight, a new challenge to overcome. Amanda continued to play the role of the victim, but the cracks in her story were starting to show. Grace was relentless, exposing every lie, every contradiction. But the most powerful moment came when I took the stand. I wasn't just fighting for my rights as a father. I was fighting for Liam and Emily's future. I love my children more than anything, I said, my voice steady despite the lump in my throat. For years, I stayed in a marriage that was toxic and painful because I thought it was the right thing to do for them. But I realized that staying was only teaching them the wrong lessons about love and respect. I couldn't let them grow up thinking that kind of life was normal. I described Amanda's emotional abuse, her constant belittling, and the night I discovered her affair. I talked about the fear and uncertainty I felt when I decided to leave, but also the determination to give my kids a better life. By the time I finished, the courtroom was silent. Even Amanda avoided my gaze. The judge's decision came on a rainy afternoon, months after the battle had begun. I sat in the courtroom, my hands clenched into fists as the judge read his ruling. In the best interest of the children, primary custody will be awarded to Mr. Mason. Relief flooded through me as the words sank in. Amanda's face twisted in anger, but I didn't care. For the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe again. As we left the courtroom, Grace turned to me and said, "You did it, Jack. You fought for them, and you won." But this wasn't about winning or losing. It was about giving Liam and Emily a chance to grow up in a home filled with love and stability. That night, as I tucked them into bed, Liam hugged me tightly and said, "I'm glad we're staying with you, Dad." I smiled, my heart full for the first time in years. "Me too, buddy. Me too." Before this journey started, I thought I was weak. I thought I couldn't do it. For years, I allowed myself to be manipulated, to be broken down piece by piece, convinced that it was my fault, that I wasn't enough. But the truth is, the only thing I wasn't enough for was a toxic relationship. And maybe that was a good thing. If you've ever been in a relationship that made you question your worth, that twisted your reality and made you doubt yourself, know that you're not alone. I've been there. I know how it feels to think you're stuck, that there's no way out. But there is. And it's not easy, it's a fight every single day. But you can win. You can break free, for yourself and for the people you love most. I did this for my kids. I fought for them. I wanted them to grow up knowing that love isn't about manipulation or control. It's about respect, trust, and support. I didn't want them to see a relationship where one person's happiness came at the expense of the other. I wanted them to see that even when things seem impossible, you can still choose a better path. Leaving wasn't easy. It wasn't just walking away from a broken marriage. It was walking away from a life I thought I had to live. But in that moment, I realized something important. I am enough. And so are you. No one, not a partner, not a friend, not anyone, should make you feel small or like you don't matter. You matter. Your happiness matters. If you're in a toxic relationship right now, if you're feeling trapped or lost, please take that first step. It's the hardest one, but it's the one that will save you. Don't let anyone convince you that you're not worthy of a healthy, loving life. I know the road ahead may seem scary, but trust me, you'll find your strength when you need it most. This story is about more than just betrayal and heartbreak. It's about recovery, rebuilding, and finding freedom. I found my way out, and if I can do it, so can you.